I remember that day like it was yesterday, even though I was only 5 years old. My name is Jenna, and that was the day my life changed forever. Dad had gone on another business trip, leaving Mom and me alone in our suburban house. I was playing with my dolls in the living room when I heard the doorbell ring. Mom rushed to answer it, her face lighting up as she saw who was there. "Jenna, honey, go to your room and play," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. I did as I was told, but curiosity got the better of me. I peeked around the corner and saw a tall man I didn't recognize. Mom was throwing clothes into a suitcase, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move before. Mom zipped up her suitcase and headed for the door. I stepped out of my hiding place, confused and scared. "Mommy, where are you going?" "I have to go away for a while, sweetie," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Be a good girl for Daddy, okay?" And just like that, she was gone. No hug, no kiss goodbye. Just the sound of a car engine starting and then fading away into the distance. I stood there, staring at the closed door, waiting for her to come back. But she didn't. The house felt bigger and emptier than ever before. As night fell, I grew more scared. I tried to turn on the lights, but I was too short to reach the switches. The darkness closed in around me, and I started to cry. "Mommy, Daddy." I called out, over and over again. But no one came. I don't know how many days passed. I was hungry and thirsty, and the dark seemed to be alive, full of monsters waiting to grab me. I cried until I had no tears left, then huddled in a corner, shaking with fear. Finally, I heard voices outside. Our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, was talking to someone. "I've been hearing a child crying for days," she was saying. "I'm worried something might have happened." The door burst open, and suddenly the house was full of people. Policemen, neighbors, and finally, my dad. "Jen," he cried, scooping me up in his arms. "Oh God, Jenna, I'm so sorry." I clung to him, sobbing with relief. Over his shoulder, I saw a policeman holding a piece of paper. "Mr. Anderson," he said gravely. "I think you should read this." Dad set me down gently and took the note. As he read it, his face crumpled. He looked older suddenly, like he'd aged years in just a few moments. "She's gone," he whispered. "Linda's gone. She left us." The next few weeks were a blur. Dad took time off work to stay with me. We had lots of visitors, relatives, friends, and a nice lady who Dad said was a child psychologist. "Jenna's been through a traumatic experience," the psychologist explained to Dad. "It's normal for her to have some fears and anxieties after what happened." And boy, did I have fears. I couldn't sleep without a light on, the dark terrified me. And I panicked whenever Dad had to leave, afraid he wouldn't come back either. The fear never really went away. It became a part of me, as much a part of my identity as my brown hair or green eyes. Jenna Anderson, the girl whose mother left her, the girl afraid of the dark, the girl always worried about being abandoned. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, life settled into a new normal. Dad and I became a team of two, figuring out how to navigate this new world without Mom. He learned to braid my hair, badly at first, but he got better with practice, and I learned how to make his coffee just the way he liked it. That changed the day Dad met Helen. I was 7 years old when Dad introduced me to her. Helen had kind eyes and a warm smile that made me feel instantly at ease. Over the next few weeks, Helen became a regular presence in our lives. She didn't try to replace my mom, something I appreciated more than I could express. Instead, she carved out her own space in our little family. One day, I overheard Dad talking to her on the phone. "I think it's time, Helen. Will you move in with us?" Helen moved in a week later. She didn't try to be my mom, but she became something just as important, a friend. She helped me with my homework, braided my hair much better than Dad ever could, and always made sure there was a nightlight in my room. As the years passed, our lives changed in other ways too. Dad's company took off, and suddenly we were moving to a big new house in a fancy neighborhood. I got my own room with a walk-in closet and a view of the backyard pool. But some things didn't change. I still slept with a nightlight. I still worried every time Dad went on a business trip. And sometimes, late at night, I'd catch Dad looking at old photos of Mom. My 10th birthday started like any other day. I woke up to the smell of pancakes, Helen's special birthday tradition for me. Dad was home from work, and we were planning a small party later. Everything seemed perfect. Then the doorbell rang. As I walked into the living room, I froze. Standing there, looking older but unmistakable, was my mother. And next to her was a little girl, about 5 years old, clutching a teddy bear and looking around wide-eyed. "Linda," Dad said, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" Mom took a deep breath. "Tom, I'm so sorry. For everything. I know I have no right to be here, but..." She gestured to the little girl. "This is Emma. She's your daughter." The room went silent. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Dad's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, and then, something else. "My daughter?" he repeated. Mom nodded. "I was pregnant when I left. I didn't know then, I swear. Tom, I've made so many mistakes. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but Emma, she deserves to know her father." I watched as Dad knelt down to the little girl's level. "Hi Emma," he said softly. I'm your dad." Emma looked up at him shyly. "Hi," she whispered. As Dad talked to Emma, I noticed Helen standing in the doorway, her face pale. She turned and walked away quickly. I wanted to follow her, but I felt rooted to the spot. The next few hours were a blur. There were lots of adult conversations I wasn't supposed to hear, raised voices, tears. I hid in my room, hugging my knees to my chest and trying to make sense of it all. Later that evening, Dad came to talk to me. "Jenna," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I know this is a lot to take in. Your mom, she's made some big mistakes. But Emma, she's innocent in all this. She's your sister. I've decided to give your mom another chance. For Emma's sake." The next day, I watched from my window as Helen packed her car. She looked up and saw me watching. With tears in her eyes, she waved goodbye. I waved back, feeling like a part of me was leaving with her. Mom and Emma moved in that same day. Emma took the guest room, and Mom took her old place in Dad's room. It felt wrong, like she was erasing the last 5 years as if they never happened. The years that followed were complicated. Mom was back, but it wasn't the happy family reunion I might have dreamed of when I was younger. She doted on Emma, showering her with attention and affection. But with me, there was always a distance, an awkwardness that never quite went away. As for Emma, well, she was just a kid. She didn't ask to be born into this mess, and I tried not to resent her. But it was hard, especially when I saw how easily she fit into Mom and Dad's life, in a way I never seemed to. By the time I turned 18, I was more than ready to leave for college. I had chosen to study zoology. Animals had always been easier for me to understand than people. They didn't judge, didn't have complicated emotions or messy family histories. They just were. The day I left for college was bittersweet. Dad hugged me tight, his eyes misty. "I'm so proud of you, Jenna," he said. "You're going to do great things." Mom gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder. "Good luck," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Emma, now 13, rolled her eyes. "Finally get my own room," she muttered. I pretended not to hear her, focusing instead on Dad's warm embrace. College was freeing. For the first time, I was away from the tension at home, the constant reminder of my complicated family situation. I threw myself into my studies, finding solace in the world of animals and nature. But even as I excelled academically, I struggled socially. Years of feeling like an outsider in my own family had left their mark. I was quiet, reserved, always afraid of getting too close to people. What if they left, like Mom had? What if they replaced me, like Emma seemed to have done? Instead, I found comfort in the college's small zoo. I volunteered there in my spare time, caring for the animals. There was a particularly grumpy old llama named Larry who became my favorite. He didn't like most people, but he seemed to tolerate me. The years at college flew by, and before I knew it, I was graduating. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I scanned the crowd. Dad was there, beaming with pride. Mom and Emma were there too, clapping politely. "Congratulations, Jenna," Mom said stiffly. "Your father and I have been talking, and, well, we think it's time you started looking for your own place. You know, spread your wings." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd contradict her, but he just looked away, his expression pained. "Right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. I'll start looking right away." The days following my graduation were tense. I was back in my childhood home, but it felt anything but welcoming. Dad tried his best to make me feel comfortable, but Mom and Emma made it clear that I was an unwanted guest. "Jenna, have you started looking for jobs yet?" Mom would ask over breakfast, her tone falsely sweet. "You know, it's important to get your foot in the door early." Emma would chime in, "Yeah, and maybe you could find your own place too. It's getting kind of cramped around here." Nights were the hardest. I still needed my nightlight to sleep, a fact that didn't escape Emma's notice. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, she barged into my room. "Seriously?" she scoffed, pointing at my nightlight. "You're 22 and you still need that? No wonder you don't have any friends." I felt my cheeks burn with shame. "Leave me alone, Emma," I muttered. But Emma wasn't done. At dinner the next day, she brought it up again, this time in front of everyone. "Hey, Mom, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Don't you think Jenna should see a therapist or something? I mean, she's an adult who's afraid of the dark and can't make friends. That's not normal, right?" I felt something snap inside me. Years of pent-up hurt and anger came flooding out. "You want to know why I'm like this, Emma?" I said, my voice shaking. "It's because when I was 5, my mother left me alone in a dark, empty house for days. Do you have any idea what that does to a child?" The table went silent. Dad looked down at his plate, his face a mask of guilt and pain. Mom's eyes widened in shock, then quickly filled with tears. "How dare you?" she cried, her voice rising dramatically. "How can you be so cruel and vindictive? I've tried so hard to make amends, to be a family again, and this is how you repay me?" As Mom continued her tearful tirade and Emma smirked triumphantly, I realized something: I couldn't live here anymore. This wasn't my home, and these people, they weren't my family. Not really. From that day on, I threw myself into job hunting with renewed vigor. Then, finally, a glimmer of hope. I had an interview scheduled at a small wildlife rehabilitation center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I left the house that morning, feeling cautiously optimistic. But when I arrived, I found a hastily scribbled note on the door. "Interviews canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. We apologize for the inconvenience." Disappointed, I headed home earlier than expected. As I unlocked the front door, I heard voices coming from the living room. Mom and Emma, deep in conversation. I was about to announce my presence when I heard my name. "If Jenna wasn't around at all," Emma was saying. "I mean, it's not fair that she gets any of Dad's money. She's not even really part of this family." "I know, sweetie," Mom replied, her voice soothing. "But we have to be patient. Once she moves out, it'll be easier to convince your father to change his will. We just need to keep pushing her to leave." I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. They wanted me gone, not just from the house, but from the family entirely. And they wanted my inheritance too. As I sat on my bed, my mind raced. What should I do? Should I tell Dad? but would he believe me over Mom and Emma? He'd forgiven Mom for abandoning us, after all. He loved them. Maybe he'd take their side. My first stroke of luck came when I saw a job posting for the city zoo. They needed a zoologist to assist with their wildlife rehabilitation program. It wasn't a glamorous position, but it was exactly what I'd been trained for. I sent in my application immediately, and to my surprise and delight, I got called in for an interview. The day of the interview, I stood in front of the zoo's main gate, taking deep breaths to calm my nerves. The interview went better than I could have hoped. The head zoologist, Dr. Martinez, seemed impressed by my knowledge and passion. "You've got the job, Jenna," she said with a warm smile. "Welcome to the team." I could have cried with relief. Finally, something was going right. Working at the zoo was everything I'd hoped for and more. I spent my days caring for injured wildlife, educating visitors about conservation, and even assisting with research projects. In the evenings, I'd return to my tiny apartment, which I was able to rent with the money I saved. To combat the loneliness, I started participating in online forums for animal lovers and people with similar interests. That's where I met Jake. Jake was from the same city, shared my love for animals, and had a wicked sense of humor that made me laugh even on my toughest days. We started chatting regularly, sharing stories about our day, and discussing everything from the latest conservation efforts to our favorite books. One day, Jake suggested we exchange photos. With trembling hands, I sent him a recent picture of me at the zoo. He responded with a photo of himself. He had kind eyes and a warm smile that made my heart skip a beat. But as much as I enjoyed our chats, the idea of meeting in person or even admitting my growing feelings terrified me. What if he rejected me once he got to know the real me? What if he left, just like Mom had? It was around this time that I started corresponding with Lily, a girl I met on a support forum for people with childhood trauma. She understood my fears in a way no one else had before. "You know what helps me?" Lily wrote one day. "I write emails to the people I can't talk to in real life. I pour out everything I'm feeling, all the things I wish I could say. But I don't send them, I just save them as drafts. It's really cathartic." Taking Lily's advice, I started writing emails to Dad. In them, I told him everything, about overhearing Mom and Emma's conversation, about how hurt I felt that he didn't seem to notice me anymore, about how I felt like an outsider in my own family. I started writing to Jake too. In these emails, I allowed myself to be vulnerable in a way I couldn't be in our chats. "Jake," I wrote, "I think I'm falling for you. But I'm scared. I'm scared of letting anyone get close to me. I'm scared of being hurt again." These emails too remained unsent, my feelings hidden away in the safety of my drafts folder. Dad called occasionally, his voice a mixture of concern and confusion. "Jenna, honey," he'd say, "why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We miss you." Each time, I'd make up an excuse. "Sorry, Dad, I've got a big project at work," or "I'm not feeling well this week, maybe next time." It was just another Saturday afternoon. I was at the mall, picking up some essentials, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. "Jenna, is that you?" I turned around and there she was, Helen, my former stepmother. She looked older, but her kind eyes were just the same. Before I knew it, we were hugging, years of separation melting away in an instant. That's when I noticed the young boy standing beside her, looking up at us curiously. "This is my nephew, Mike," Helen explained, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. "I'm raising him now. My sister, she passed away last year." Over coffee, Helen filled me in on her life. After she and Dad split up, she'd been on her own until her sister's death left Mike in her care. We started meeting regularly after that, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with Mike. One day Helen called and urgently asked to look after Mike. That evening, Mike arrived at my apartment, backpack in tow. As I prepared dinner in my tiny kitchen, I could hear him tapping away on my laptop in the living room. I'd told him he could play games if he finished his homework. When I came out of the kitchen with 2 plates of spaghetti, I found Mike looking guilty, his face pale. "Jenna," he said, his voice trembling. "I did something bad. I was curious, and I saw these emails in your drafts folder. And I sent them. All of them. I'm so sorry." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Those emails, my private thoughts, my deepest feelings, sent out into the world. To Dad. To Jake. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night, after Mike left, I lay in bed, my mind racing. What would Dad think? And Jake, oh God, Jake. My phone pinged with a message notification. It was from Jake, but I couldn't bring myself to read it. What if he was disgusted by my feelings? What if he never wanted to speak to me again? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, imagining all the worst-case scenarios. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Dad. "Jenna," he said, his voice serious, "we need to talk. Can you meet me at the cafe near your old high school?" My heart pounded as I sat across from Dad in the small cafe. He looked tired, his face etched with lines I hadn't noticed before. "I got your emails," he said quietly. "Jenna, I had no idea you were feeling this way. About your mother, about Emma, about everything." I couldn't meet his eyes, shame and fear warring inside me. "Jenna, look at me," Dad said, his voice gentle but firm. I looked up, surprised to see tears in his eyes. "I love you. More than anything in this world. I'm so sorry I made you feel like you weren't important to me. That was never, ever my intention." We talked for hours, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. About Mom's return, about Emma, about how I'd felt pushed aside and forgotten. Dad listened, really listened, occasionally wiping away a tear. Finally, he stood up. "I need some time to process all this," he said. "But Jenna, we're going to figure this out. You and me. I promise." As I watched him walk away, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. What would happen now? But I didn't have much time to dwell on it because my phone rang again. It was Jake. "Jenna," he said, his voice warm. "I got your email. And I feel the same way. I'd been too scared to say it, but I really like you. Would you like to meet for coffee?" My heart soared. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "I'd love to." The next day, I met Jake at a small coffee shop. He was even more handsome in person, with a kind smile that put me at ease immediately. We talked for hours, about our fears, our dreams, our pasts. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and understood. As autumn leaves began to fall, my phone rang one crisp morning. It was Dad. "Jenna," he said, his voice warm but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. "I'd like you to come to Thanksgiving dinner. It's important to me that you're there." Something in his tone made me agree. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and I stood on the doorstep of my childhood home, my heart pounding. Jake had offered to come with me for support, but I felt this was something I needed to face on my own. Mom opened the door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Jenna, how nice of you to join us." Emma, lounging on the couch, barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, you came." Dad emerged from the kitchen, enveloping me in a warm hug. "I'm glad you're here, sweetheart," he whispered. As we sat down to dinner, the tension was palpable. Mom and Emma exchanged glances, their smiles strained and artificial. Dad, however, seemed oddly calm. Just as Mom began to serve the turkey, Dad cleared his throat. "Before we begin, there's something we need to discuss." He reached down beside his chair and pulled out a thick manila folder. Dad began pulling out documents, laying them on the table. "Linda, Emma, I've known for a while that something wasn't right. So I did some investigating." He held up a bank statement. "First, I discovered regular withdrawals from our accounts that I didn't make. Quite substantial amounts, in fact." Mom's face paled. Emma suddenly found her plate very interesting. Then, Dad continued, pulling out another document. I hired a private investigator. Linda, he provided photographic evidence of your encounters with a certain gentleman at the Rosewood Hotel. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tom, I can explain. But Dad wasn't finished. He pulled out one final document, his hand shaking slightly. And finally, I had a DNA test done. Emma isn't my biological daughter. The room fell silent. Emma's phone clattered to the floor. Mom looked like she might faint. I've already spoken to my lawyer, Dad said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Linda, I'm filing for divorce. And I'm afraid I'll have to ask both you and Emma to leave this house. Mom found her voice, anger replacing shock. You can't do this. I'll take you for everything you've got. Dad's expression hardened. Actually, Linda, you won't. If you try to claim any property, I'll countersue for fraud and demand repayment of all the money you've taken, plus what I've spent raising Emma. My lawyer assures me I have a very strong case. Tears streamed down Mom's face as the reality of the situation sank in. Emma sat in stunned silence, her world crumbling around her. In the days that followed, Mom and Emma moved out. Dad and I began to rebuild our relationship, stronger than ever before. We had weekly dinners, long talks, and even started planning a father-daughter road trip. One day, over coffee, Dad hesitantly brought up Helen. I'd been thinking a lot about the past, he said. About the mistakes I made. I reached out to Helen to apologize. We'd been meeting for coffee, talking things through. I smiled, genuinely happy for him. That's wonderful, Dad. Helen is an amazing woman. As for me, things with Jake were going better than I could have ever imagined. He was patient, kind, and understood my fears and insecurities. With his support, I was even starting to work through my issues in therapy.
My name is Alina Thompson. I'm a 35-year-old marketing executive and a single mom to my incredible 10-year-old son, Ethan. As usual, my morning is a whirlwind. I'm in the kitchen, scrambling to pack Ethan's lunch while simultaneously firing off work emails on my phone. Chaos, yes, but it's my life. Mom, have you seen my science project? Ethan shouts from upstairs. I sigh, momentarily pausing my multitasking. Check the living room, honey. I think I saw it on the coffee table. Just as I return to my emails, my phone buzzes. It's a message from my brother. Mike. Hey sis. Emma and I can pick up Ethan from soccer practice today if you need us to. Relief floods through me. That would be amazing, Mike. Thanks. Mike and his wife, Emma, have been my rock since Ethan was born. They live just a few blocks away and are always willing to help out. Emma, in particular, has boundless energy when it comes to Ethan. Later that evening, I'm in the kitchen preparing dinner when Emma brings Ethan home. She hovers, her eyes scanning the cluttered countertops and the pile of dishes in the sink. Busy day? She asks, her tone overly sweet. I nod, suppressing the irritation building inside me. Yeah, you know how it is. Oh, I can only imagine, she replies, running a perfectly manicured hand through her hair. I don't know how you manage it all. Work, single motherhood. It must be exhausting. There's something in her voice that grates on me, but I let it go. It can be, but it's worth it. Emma smiles, but her eyes don't quite match the expression. Well, if you ever need a break, we're always here to help. Oh, and Ethan was telling me about his birthday next week. He's so excited about the gift I promised him. I raise an eyebrow. What gift? Emma winks. It's a surprise, but trust me, he's going to love it. As she leaves, I can't shake the feeling that there's more to Emma's generosity than she lets on. But I brush it off. She's family, after all. The next morning, I'm in a meeting when a text from Ethan comes through. Mom, Aunt Emma got me the new gaming console for my birthday. Can't wait to play it. My stomach drops. The console he's been begging for is outrageously expensive. Why would Emma promise him something like that without discussing it with me first? That evening, I confront her. Emma, you really didn't have to get him that. It's too much. She waves her hand dismissively. Oh, don't be silly. Nothing's too much for our Ethan. Besides, I know you've been busy, so I wanted to help. Her words sting, but I force a smile. Thanks, I appreciate it. As I watch her chat animatedly with Ethan about his party, I can't help feeling a pang of something, jealousy, unease. I'm not sure. But as Ethan's excitement builds, I push my feelings aside. What could possibly go wrong? The day of Ethan's birthday party arrives, and the house is alive with energy. Kids are running around, parents are chatting, and the smell of fresh-baked cake fills the air. I'm in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on the snacks when Emma bursts in, carrying a massive, beautifully wrapped box. "Where's the birthday boy?" she calls out, her eyes sparkling. Ethan rushes into the room, his face lighting up when he sees the gift. "Is that for me, Aunt Emma?" "You bet it is, champ." Emma grins as she sets the box down in front of him. I watch as Ethan tears into the wrapping, revealing the gaming console he's been dreaming about. The room fills with gasps and excited whispers. Ethan throws his arms around Emma, beaming. "Wow, Emma," one of the other moms exclaims. "That's quite the gift." Emma basks in the attention. Only the best for my favorite nephew. A wave of inadequacy washes over me, but I push it aside. This is Ethan's day, and his happiness is all that matters. The party is in full swing when I notice Ethan looking pale. I rush to his side, alarmed. "Honey, are you okay?" Before he can respond, he doubles over and vomits, his small body shaking violently. Panic claws at my chest. "Someone call 911. I scream, holding Ethan tightly as he convulses in my arms. The next few hours blur together. Sirens, hospital corridors, doctors talking in rushed tones. I pace the waiting room, my heart lodged in my throat. Then a doctor approaches, his expression grim. "Miss Thompson, we've completed Ethan's toxicology report." My world screeches to a halt. "Toxicology? What do you mean?" The doctor's words hit me like a freight train. "Your son ingested a dangerous combination of drugs. We're doing everything we can. But do you have any idea how this could have happened?" Numb with shock, I shake my head. No, he was at his birthday party, surrounded by family and friends. At that moment, 2 police officers enter the room. "Miss Thompson, we need to ask you some questions about the gifts your son received today." Reality slams into me like a wave. The gifts, the console, Emma. The days blur into one long nightmare as I keep vigil by Ethan's bedside. The steady beep of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen filling the silence. Mike visits, his face etched with worry. "Alina, the police want to search our house," he says quietly. "They think the drugs may have been hidden in one of Ethan's gifts." I nodded numbly, barely processing Mike's words. All I could focus on was Ethan's pale face, so small against the stark white hospital pillows. One night, as I sat by his bedside, holding his hand, a detective entered the room. "Miss Thompson, we need to talk about your sister-in-law, Emma. We have some questions about her involvement in this incident." In that moment, something inside me hardened. If Emma was responsible for this, if she had hurt my son, there would be hell to pay, and I would make sure of it. As Ethan slowly recovered, the gnawing suspicion about Emma only grew. Her visits to the hospital were oddly timed, always when Mike wasn't around. One day, I overheard her on the phone just outside Ethan's room. "No, it didn't work. I know. We'll figure something out," she hissed before abruptly ending the call when she noticed me. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice icy. "Oh, just work stuff." Emma laughed nervously, quickly changing the subject. "How's our little fighter doing today?" I narrowed my eyes. "Our little fighter? He's my son, Emma." Later that evening, I confided in Mike about my suspicions. His reaction floored me. "Are you serious, Alina? Emma, she loves Ethan. How could you even think that?" "Mike, something's not right. The way she's been acting." He cut me off. "Stop it. You're stressed and looking for someone to blame. Emma would never hurt Ethan." Frustrated and feeling completely alone, I turned to my coworker, Jason, over coffee. "I need your help," I confessed. "I think Emma might be behind what happened to Ethan, but I can't prove it." Jason's eyes widened. "That's a serious accusation. What do you need? Can you dig into her background? There's got to be something we're missing." A few days later, Jason called me, his voice urgent. "Alina, you need to see this." He showed me what he had found. Records Emma had carefully hidden. Past drug charges, petty theft, even a stint in rehab. My blood ran cold. Mike needs to see this, I said, but when I showed him, he exploded. You had no right. This is ancient history. Emma's changed. Our relationship fractured at that moment, but I wasn't done. Desperate for answers, I took matters into my own hands. I installed hidden cameras in the house, the invasion of privacy making my skin crawl. But I was determined to uncover the truth. It didn't take long. The next time Emma came over to help out, I watched in horror as she rifled through Ethan's medication, slipping something into the bottles. Rage surged through me. I confronted her immediately. I saw what you did, Emma. It's over. Her face twisted in panic. You don't understand. I had to do it. Had to do what? Poison my son. No, I just wanted him to get sick. Just enough so you'd need me so I could be the one to save him. Her voice cracked with desperation. I didn't mean to hurt him. It was supposed to be harmless, just enough to make him ill. But then it went wrong, and I couldn't admit what I'd done. I stared at her in disgust. Save him? You almost killed him. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't mean to. You don't know what it's like, Alina. You have everything, a great job, a beautiful son. I just wanted to be needed, to be the hero for once. I felt sick to my core. You're sick, Emma. You need help. Please, she begged, grabbing my arm. Don't tell Mike. We can fix this. I'll leave. I'll never bother you again. Just don't ruin my life over one mistake. I yanked my arm free, my voice cold. One mistake. You've been lying and manipulating us for years. This ends now. As I reached for my phone to call the police, Emma's eyes darkened, her expression turning cold. If you do this, I'll tell them it was you, she threatened, her voice low and venomous. I'll say you've been abusing Ethan, that you set me up. That'll be your word against mine. In that instant, I realized how truly dangerous Emma was. She wasn't just desperate. She was calculating, capable of turning everything against me. But I'd be damned if I let her threaten my family ever again. Try it, I snarled. I dare you. As I dialed 911, Emma's bravado crumbled, her face twisting with panic as the weight of her actions finally sank in. But it was too late for remorse. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The day I handed over the evidence to the police was both terrifying and liberating. Detective Johnson listened closely as I played the recordings and showed him the footage from the hidden cameras. This is substantial evidence, Ms. Thompson, he said gravely. We'll bring Emma in for questioning immediately. I stood by the window, watching as police cars pulled up to Mike and Emma's house. The sight of her being led out in handcuffs felt surreal. Mike's face was a mask of shock and disbelief. Later that evening, Mike came to my door, his eyes red and swollen. Is it true? He asked, his voice breaking. I nodded, my heart aching for my brother. I'm so sorry, Mike. He collapsed into my arms, sobbing. How could I have been so blind? In court, Emma's carefully constructed facade finally shattered. Her testimony revealed a twisted plan born of jealousy and desperation. She confessed to tampering with Ethan's medication, admitting that she had intended to frame me for neglect. I just wanted to be the hero, she sobbed on the stand. I wanted Alina to fail so I could swoop in and save the day. The jury's verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. As the judge sentenced Emma to 15 years in prison, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. 2 years later, life has settled into a new rhythm. Ethan, now 12, is thriving in school and shows no lasting effects from what he went through. I've poured myself into my work, earning a promotion to vice president of marketing. Mike and I have slowly started to rebuild our relationship. It hasn't been easy, but we're getting there. He's in therapy, working through the trauma of Emma's betrayal. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust again, he confided in me during a recent visit. But I'm trying, for you and for Ethan. We've heard through the grapevine that Emma isn't faring well in prison. She's fallen back into old habits, isolated and struggling with addiction again. Part of me feels a twisted sense of satisfaction, but mostly, I just feel pity. As for me, I've learned valuable lessons about trust and the importance of real family. Ethan and I have grown closer than ever, our bond stronger for having weathered the storm together. Mom, Ethan said to me the other day, I'm glad it's just us now. You're all the family I need. His words brought tears to my eyes. We've been through hell, but we've come out the other side stronger. That night, as I tucked him into bed, I realized that sometimes the family you choose is more important than the one you're born into. Sitting here now, watching Ethan play in the backyard, I feel a sense of peace I haven't known in years. The echoes of our past still linger, but they no longer define us. We're moving forward, one day at a time, building the life we deserve. And that's a gift more precious than anything I could have imagined. If you were in my position, do you think you could ever forgive Emma for what she did? Or do you believe that some actions are truly unforgivable, even when they come from family? Hey everyone, I'm Olivia Johnson. I'm 28, a marketing executive, and until recently, I thought I had my life all figured out. But boy, was I wrong. I've always been close to my parents, but my grandmother, Beatrice, is a different story. She's had this borderline obsession with my cousin Megan for as long as I can remember. To her, Megan can do no wrong. The other day, I was having coffee with my mom when she dropped some news that left me speechless. "Honey, did you hear about Megan's wedding plans?" she asked. I rolled my eyes. Let me guess, something else for Grandma to gush over. Mom looked a little uneasy. Well, it's more than that. Your grandmother, she's offered to pay for Megan's destination wedding. In the Maldives? I nearly choked on my coffee. Are you serious? Mom nodded, sympathy in her eyes. I'm afraid so, but there's more? Before she could finish, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Grandma Beatrice herself. I opened it, and my jaw dropped. A courthouse ceremony should be enough for your wedding, Olivia. No need for unnecessary expenses, it read. I showed the text to Mom, my hands shaking. Can you believe this? She sighed deeply. I'm so sorry, sweetie. I don't know what's gotten into her. I was fuming. It's always been like this, Mom. Megan gets the world, and I get leftovers. As if on cue, my phone rang again. Aunt Karen, Megan's mom. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Oh, Olivia darling, isn't Megan's wedding going to be wonderful? I'm so thrilled for her. Aunt Karen's tone was dripping with smugness. I gritted my teeth. Yeah, Aunt Karen, thrilling. Oh, and I heard about your courthouse plans. How quaint, she added, her voice oozing with fake kindness. I'm sure it'll be nice. I couldn't stand it. Thanks for your concern, Aunt Karen. I've got to go. I hung up and turned to Mom, frustrated beyond words. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of being treated like I'm second class. Mom squeezed my hand. I know, honey, but remember, you have Mark. He loves you for who you are. Ah, Mark, my fiancé, the one bright spot in all this madness. Right then, he walked through the door. Hey, babe, I brought dinner. What's wrong? I looked at him, trying to hold back my tears. We need to talk about our wedding plans. You might want to sit down for this. That night, I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning as my mind raced. By morning, I'd had enough. I was going to confront Grandma Beatrice once and for all. I rehearsed my words during the drive to her house. When I finally arrived, I took a deep breath and knocked. Olivia, what a surprise. Grandma greeted me. We need to talk, I said, walking past her into the living room. She sighed as if she knew what was coming. This is about the wedding, isn't it? Damn right it is, I snapped. How could you offer to pay for Megan's destination wedding then tell me a courthouse is sufficient? Now, don't be so dramatic, she waved her hand dismissively. Megan needs the help more than you do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you kidding me? Mark and I are struggling, and you think we don't need help? If you had chosen a more lucrative career like Megan, she started. I cut her off, furious. My career isn't the issue here. Your blatant favoritism is. Before I could say more, the door swung open. Aunt Karen stormed in, Megan trailing behind her. How dare you speak to your grandmother like that? Karen screeched. Megan smirked. Jealousy isn't a good look on you, cuss. I turned to them. Live it. Oh, look. Perfect timing. The golden child and her enabler. Karen's face flushed red. You ungrateful little. Ungrateful. For what? For years of being treated like I'm less than Megan. I shot back. Megan stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. It's not my fault Grandma loves me more. Maybe if you weren't such a disappointment. Something inside me snapped. A disappointment. I've worked my ass off for everything I have, unlike you, who's had everything handed to you on a silver platter. Grandma stood, her voice shaking. That's enough, Olivia. I think you should leave. I stared at her, hurt and anger warring inside me. Gladly. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you realize how toxic this all is. As I stormed out, I heard Aunt Karen consoling Megan. Don't worry, sweetie. We'll make sure your wedding is perfect, unlike some people's. Tears streamed down my face as I got in the car. I called Mark, my voice breaking. Babe, can you meet me at Sarah's? I need you, both of you. 20 minutes later, I was in Sarah's living room, recounting the whole mess. Sarah, my best friend since childhood, was livid. I can't believe them. Something isn't right about all this. Mark pulled me close. Why don't we just elope? Forget about them all. The next day, I plastered on my best fake smile and headed to Megan's place. The second I stepped through the door, she started gushing about her wedding plans. So, I'm thinking a sunset ceremony on the beach, followed by a reception under the stars, she said, beaming. Oh, and you have to see my dress. She shoved her phone in my face, eagerly scrolling through pictures. I feigned interest, nodding and offering the occasional compliment, all while keeping an eye out for the right moment. When Megan excused herself to the bathroom, I quickly grabbed her phone and began snooping. What I found made my blood run cold. There were texts between Megan and Aunt Karen, talking about securing the bag and making sure the old lady doesn't change her mind. But the real shocker was a string of messages with my Uncle Tom about moving money around. They were manipulating Grandma behind the scenes, and it wasn't just about Megan's wedding. It was about siphoning funds. I snapped a few quick photos with my phone just as Megan walked back in. Find anything interesting? She asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I forced a grin. Just admiring your dress again. I lied smoothly. That night, I called Sarah. I need your help, but you can't ask questions. She hesitated. Liv, you know I can't break big confidentiality. I'm not asking you to. Just, if you see anything weird in Grandma's accounts, give me a heads up, okay? Please, Sarah. There was a long pause. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but be careful. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the supportive cousin while secretly gathering more evidence. I accidentally overheard conversations, peeked at documents Megan left lying around, and even followed Uncle Tom one night to a casino. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. Then, one day, Sarah called me. Liv, there's been some unusual activity on your grandma's accounts. Large withdrawals, transfers to offshore accounts. Thanks, Sarah. I owe you. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to confront Uncle Tom. I waited until I knew he'd be alone in his office and cornered him. Uncle Tom, we need to talk about the money you've been stealing from Grandma. His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the crap. I know about the embezzlement, the gambling, and I know Megan and Aunt Karen are blackmailing you. He collapsed into his chair, breaking down and confessing everything. He told me how it had started small, just a few withdrawals to cover debts, until Karen caught wind of it. She threatened to expose him unless he helped funnel money to Megan. Before long, it had spiraled completely out of control. Please, Olivia, he begged, tears in his eyes. Don't turn me in. I'll lose everything. I looked at him coldly. You should have thought of that before you stole from your own mother. As I walked out of his office, my phone buzzed with a new text. The sender was unknown, but attached was a video. Curious, I opened it and gasped. It was Megan, in a very compromising position with none other than Grandma's close friend, Richard. The text that followed read, Thought you might find this interesting. A friend. A grim smile spread across my face. The final piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. It was time to end this, once and for all. The day of Megan's engagement party arrived, and I was ready. I'd spent weeks meticulously gathering every shred of evidence I could. As I walked into Grandma's lavishly decorated backyard, a wave of nervousness and determination washed over me. Olivia, so glad you could make it, Megan chirped, air-kissing my cheek. I forced a smile, wouldn't miss it for the world. As the party got into full swing, I waited for the perfect moment to unleash the truth. I caught Sarah's eye from across the room. She gave me a subtle nod. It was time. I clinked my glass, the sharp sound cutting through the party chatter. Everyone, if I could have your attention, I called out. Megan beamed, clearly loving the spotlight. If only she knew what was coming. I'd like to make a toast to the happy couple, I began. Megan's smile widened. But before I do, I think it's important that we clear the air about a few things. Her smile wavered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I turned to face Grandma Beatrix. Grandma, did you know that Uncle Tom has been embezzling money from your accounts? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Uncle Tom's face flushed as he started to sweat. That's ridiculous. Aunt Karen snapped, trying to intervene. Olivia, this is just your jealousy talking. Oh, but you knew all about it, didn't you, Aunt Karen? I shot back, my voice steady. In fact, you and Megan have been blackmailing Uncle Tom to keep quiet. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of Uncle Tom's confession. The color drained from Aunt Karen's face as the room fell silent, all eyes now on her and Megan. That's not true. Megan sputtered, her voice trembling. Oh, but it is, I said, turning to Megan's fiancé. And that's not all. Did you know your bride-to-be has been cheating on you? With multiple partners, including one of Grandma's friends. I pressed play on the video I received. The room erupted as the shocking footage played. Megan's fiancé looked as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. His face was pale, eyes wide with disbelief. You, he could barely get the words out. You've been lying to me. Megan lunged at me, but her fiancé held her back. It's over, Megan, he said, his voice breaking. The wedding's off. Megan crumbled, her mascara streaking down her tear-stained face. In the chaos that followed, Grandma Beatrix stumbled, clutching her chest. I can't believe this. Uncle Tom was cornered by furious relatives, demanding explanations. Aunt Karen was in full damage control mode, but it was too late. Megan was sobbing uncontrollably, her perfect world falling apart before her eyes. Grandma approached me, her eyes swimming with tears. Olivia, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I held up my hand. Save it, Grandma. You might not have known about the money, but you've played favorites for years. That's on you. As I turned to leave, I heard her weakly call out, Please, Olivia, can't we talk about this? I paused at the gate and looked back at the wreckage I'd left behind. Maybe someday, Grandma, I said quietly. But not today. With that, I walked out, leaving the sounds of arguments and tears behind me. Mark was waiting in the car, his expression calm but concerned. How'd it go? He asked as I slid into the passenger seat. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of resentment finally lifting off my shoulders. It's done. Let's go home. As we drove away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was out. Justice had been served. I was finally free from the toxic web of lies my family had spun around me. It wasn't the happy ending I'd once imagined, but it was the ending I needed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have exposed your family's lies and betrayals, knowing it could tear everything apart? Or would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace, even if it meant continuing to be treated unfairly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hey there, I'm Sarah Johnson. I'm 28, living in Chicago and crushing it as a marketing executive. Life's going pretty well, except for one tiny issue. My blended family. It's a mess, especially when it comes to my step-siblings, Emma and Mark. My dad remarried when I was 15, and let's just say it hasn't been smooth sailing since. So the other day, we had one of those family gatherings, and I could immediately tell something was off. Everyone was acting weird, whispering, exchanging glances, and I kept catching snippets of conversations like, "We've got to ask her," and "It's the only way." My mind started racing, wondering what the hell they were plotting this time. My brother Tom, who's always been tight with Emma and Mark, which drives me nuts, noticed me watching them. He came over casually. "Hey sis, how's it going?" "Fine," I replied, eyeing him suspiciously. "What's with all the secret talks?" He laughed it off. "Oh, just family stuff." "Yeah, right." I decided to play it cool and mingle, but I stayed on high alert. My stepmom Patricia cornered me by the snack table. "Sarah, dear, it's so lovely to see you. We don't get together enough." I forced a smile. "Yeah, work's been crazy." "Well, family should always come first," she said, giving me this intense look that made me super uncomfortable. I excused myself, needing a breather, and headed to the bathroom. On my way back, I overheard Emma talking to her husband James. "We have to tell them soon. They're getting suspicious." "I know, but what if she says no?" James replied. I froze. Were they talking about me? What the hell was going on? The rest of the night, I was watching everyone like a hawk. My dad was being extra nice, Mark kept trying to make conversation, and Emma looked like she was on the verge of tears the whole time. By the time I left, my head was spinning. I had this sinking feeling that something big was coming, and I wasn't going to like it. On my drive home, I called my best friend, Olivia. Liv, you won't believe the weirdness I just experienced. Spill it, girl. What happened? I filled her in on all the bizarre behavior and hushed conversations. Sounds fishy, she said. Want me to do some digging? Nah, I got this, but thanks. I'll keep you posted. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. My family was sitting on a bombshell, and it was about to blow my world apart. Fast forward a week after that strange family gathering. Tom calls me up, sounding all serious. Sarah, we need to have an important family discussion. Can you come to dinner at Dad and Patricia's? I knew something was up, but I agreed, figuring I might as well face whatever this was head on. When I arrived, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone was sitting around the dining room table, looking like they were at a funeral. All right, I said, taking a seat. What's this all about? Emma immediately started crying. Through her sobs, she went on about her fertility issues and how James' family was pressuring them for grandkids. I was sympathetic, but still confused. What did this have to do with me? Then Mark dropped the bomb. Sarah, we were hoping you'd consider being a surrogate for Emma and James. I nearly choked on my water. Excuse me. Tom jumped in, all excited. Yeah, sis, it would be perfect. You're not seeing anyone right now, and it would mean so much to Emma. I was in shock. Hold up. You want me to carry a baby for 9 months, go through labor, and then just hand it over? Are you all insane? Patricia gave me her usual disappointed look. Sarah, dear, it's for family. Surely you can make this sacrifice for your sister. Stepsister, I corrected her, feeling my anger rising. And no, I can't just put my life on hold for a year. What about my job? My social life? My body? Emma was still sobbing. Please, Sarah, you're our only hope. I've already told James' family you agreed. You did what? I was furious. How could you volunteer me without even asking? My dad finally spoke up. Now, Sarah, let's not be hasty. This could bring our family closer together. Ada had a bitter laugh. Closer together? By using me as an incubator? No way. Then it hit me. Wait a minute, Tom, is this why you've been asking about my breakup with Mike? Were you waiting for me to be single so you could spring this on me? Tom looked guilty. Well, we thought it might be easier if you weren't in a relationship. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I can't believe this. You've all been plotting behind my back, manipulating me. And for what? So Emma can have a baby. It's not just about the baby, James said quietly. My family, they might cut me off if we don't have a child soon. That sounds like a you problem, I snapped, not a me problem. Patricia, always one to try and guilt trip me, chimed in. Sarah, don't be selfish. Think of your sister's happiness. That was the last straw. Selfish. I shot back, my voice rising. You're the ones being selfish, asking me to give up a year of my life, risk my health, and go through this for nothing. And you didn't even offer any compensation. Compensation? Emma looked horrified. But we're family. I grabbed my purse, shaking my head in disbelief. Family doesn't manipulate each other like this. I'm done. As I headed for the door, their voices followed me, begging me to reconsider, but I wasn't having any of it. I slammed the door behind me and drove off, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The nerve of them. I felt so betrayed. One thing was certain. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. After that disaster of a dinner, I needed space. I ignored all the calls and texts from my family for weeks. But something kept nagging at me. Why were they so desperate? There had to be more to this. I decided to dig deeper. I met up with Olivia at our favorite coffee shop. Liv, I can't shake this feeling. Something doesn't add up. Well, she said, pulling out her laptop, let's see what we can find. What do we know so far? We started with Emma and James. It didn't take long to uncover some dirt. Holy crap, I muttered, staring at the screen. They're drowning in debt. Look at these credit card statements. Olivia whistled, scrolling through the details. Designer clothes, fancy restaurants. They'd been living way beyond their means. But that was just the beginning. Through a friend of a friend at James's company, I learned that he was on thin ice at work. Rumors were swirling that he'd been cutting corners, maybe even cooking the books. No wonder they're so desperate for a baby, I said. They're trying to secure James's position in his family's company. Then came the real shocker. I decided to reach out to Alex, a friend of mine who worked at Dad's company. When I called, I kept it casual at first. Hey Alex, has anything seemed off with the company finances lately? There was a long pause before he responded. Sarah, I really shouldn't be telling you this, but yeah, there have been some irregularities. Money disappearing and reappearing, all linked to Tom's apartment. My stomach dropped. He's embezzling, isn't he? I can't say for sure, Alex said carefully, but it looks that way. I hung up, feeling sick. Liv, Tom's stealing from Dad's company. He must be in deep trouble to risk something like that. But why push so hard for me to be a surrogate? Olivia raised an eyebrow. Maybe he's trying to stay in your dad's good graces. If he helps Emma get a baby, your dad might be so grateful he won't dig too deep into the books. The more we dug, the worse it got. Turns out Mark wasn't innocent either. He and James had a failed business venture a few years back, and Mark still owed James a ton of money. So Mark's pushing for this surrogacy to get James off his back about the debt, I realized, disgusted by how tangled it all was. By the end of our investigation, I felt like I was going to be sick. My entire family had been lying and scheming, using me as a pawn in their twisted games. What are you going to do? Olivia asked. I stood up, my mind racing with a plan. I'm going to expose every last one of them. They want to play games. Fine. But they picked the wrong person to mess with. I pulled out my phone and sent a group text. Family meeting tomorrow. 7:00 p.m. Be there. It was time to end this, once and for all. They thought they could manipulate me. They had no idea what was coming. The next evening, I walked into my parents' house, a folder full of evidence in one hand and a heart full of determination. Everyone was already seated when I walked in, tension thick in the air. They looked nervous, exchanging glances, clearly unsure of what was coming. I stood in front of them, my voice steady. Thanks for coming. I've been thinking about your proposal. Emma perked up, hopeful. Does this mean you'll do it? I gave her a cold smile. Not exactly. See, I've been doing some digging, and I've made some interesting discoveries. I turned to Tom first. Let's start with you, big brother. Embezzling from Dad's company. Really? The color drained from Tom's face. What are you talking about? I pulled out the papers I'd gathered. I've got proof right here. Want me to show Dad? Dad stood up, shock spreading across his face. Tom, is this true? Tom stammered, trying to deny it, but his guilt was written all over his face. Next, I turned to Mark. And you, pushing for this surrogacy to get James off your back about that failed business debt? Classy move. Mark's eyes widened. How did you? I have my ways, I cut him off. Just like I know about Emma and James living beyond their means, racking up debt, and James's shady practices at work. Emma burst into tears while James looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. I faced Dad and Patricia, and you too, willing to sacrifice my health and future just to keep this facade of a happy family going. Patricia opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. I'm not finished. You all thought you could use me, manipulate me. Well, guess what? I'm done. Done with the lies, the schemes, all of it. The room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew, tears flowed, and years of pent-up resentment came crashing down. In the midst of it all, Dad approached me, looking devastated. Sarah, I had no idea about any of this. I'm so sorry. I softened just a little. Yeah, well, maybe pay more attention to what's happening in your own family next time. As the dust began to settle, I made my position clear. I'm cutting ties with all of you, except Dad, if he's willing to make amends. The rest of you, don't contact me again. I walked out of that house feeling lighter than I had in years. Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as my family's carefully constructed lies unraveled. Tom lost his job and faced legal trouble. Mark's reputation took a hit, and his career suffered. Emma and James's marriage crumbled under the strain. As for me, I threw myself into my work, earning the big promotion. I deepened my friendships with people like Olivia, who had supported me through everything. 6 months later, I heard some news that made me smile. James's company had gone bankrupt due to fraud, and he was facing charges. Emma, now broke and divorced, tried to reach out to me, but I ignored her calls. Standing in my new apartment in New York, where I'd moved for an amazing job opportunity, I realized something. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the one you're born into. I'd lost a toxic family, but I'd gained something far more valuable: self-respect and freedom. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. The story's over, but I've got a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you consider forgiving any of my family members? Emma's now divorced and struggling. Should I give her another chance, or was cutting ties completely the right move? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.